Hello, Minot sports fans. A good day to you once again. You are tuning in now to another episode of the 2021 Summer Series. We are now on to episode 5. We are proudly producing inside the KMSU TV and radio studios, home to the many young and fine Minot State broadcasters and communication majors here on the wonderful campus of Minot State. We have another special guest here on the show for you guys today. We are welcomed by the president of North Dakota Softball All-Stars. Give it up here now for Mr. Tim Howe. Mr. Howe, how are you doing today on this fine Thursday?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for having me and for chatting about softball today.
Absolutely, and we're going to get into a lot of softball conversation today, but we made an exchange on the ND Softball All-Stars on the Twitter feed. Just kind of got a little started there. That's how we crossed paths. But talk about the inception of ND Softball All-Stars. Take us through that scene of when this program got started.
Yeah, shoot, that was, getting close to 6 years ago now, or maybe slightly over 6 years ago now. I was a fast pitch softball coach at Northern Cass, just about 30 minutes north of Fargo on the east side of the state. And we were at a state convention that was being held in Fargo. And I suppose we had maybe 15 to 20 softball coaches in a room and just talking about, at that time, the game still felt like it was in its infancy in the state of North Dakota. And a lot of discussion was had about, where other sports are at and really where softball is at that time in states like Minnesota and Wisconsin that had really mature high school softball scenes. And one of the discussion points for a significant amount of time was about how do we, sort of showcase these players and help, maybe a sophomore in high school today get to a dream of playing college softball. And at that time, that wasn't happening a ton in the state. And the more we talked, the more it was just, we felt like a growth opportunity, right? More publicity, maybe. There wasn't a lot of that at the time, and really more opportunity. And the conversation just kept coming back to why don't we have an opportunity for these kids to play in an all-star game? There's so many great ones in the state with what they do for basketball, volleyball, football. I believe soccer has had an on and off all-star event over the years. And really the question was, do you wait for the sport to grow to the point where it makes sense, or do you start now and kind of help the sport grow? And now we're, 5 all-star events later and starting planning for a 6th and working on our 2nd high school softball tournament that'll be here in Fargo in May. And it's just been, fun to watch the sport grow over the last 6 years.
Oh, yeah. And I've seen a lot of the games here, especially in Minot at the South Hill Softball Complex, especially a lot of the tournaments that are being hosted, whether it's Class A or Class B. And you bring up a good point. Football having their all-star series, and you mentioned soccer in there too. Was that kind of just a motivating factor? Like, how the other sports, especially like football, they're so big. A lot of people are most interested in that. Was that kind of a motivating factor? And also that there's really just an open session to having a softball all-star series in that case.
I really think it was. And, we actually had a coach in the room that also had been involved in coaching basketball. And, he kind of just spoke to the joy and excitement that some of his athletes had, really through the whole process of finding out they were, I believe it's a Lions basketball all-star, to playing in the event. An event like that usually gets, in the paper and on the local news. And just as that conversation went, it was, why don't we have that opportunity for the softball kids? And seeing how it's worked out, I mean, I don't think it could have gone any better. And, we had a girl this year from Valley City by the name of Haley Shafer, an excellent softball player, and has been since she was an underclassman.
Absolutely.
She was quoted in her in the News Dakota paper out there saying this is something that she's always wanted, which was just kind of crazy for us to think about, because to us this is still pretty new. But you go back to about 6 years ago when we announced the first All-Star game would be happening, she wouldn't have been in high school yet. So really, we've gotten to that point, I think, behind that motivation of just knowing how these volleyball and basketball players have felt and enjoyed and experienced in the all-star space, and knowing we could do it in softball. It was pretty hard to not go forward with it at that time.
So getting some help from students, even from student athletes, that's a pretty big get, for you guys to be able to incorporate, a huge event like this, and to be able to meet, the expectations that even, like you mentioned, Haley Shafer, was that her name, correct?
Correct.
Yep. So having meeting those for her, and, just think about it, probably one of those things where students were probably thinking, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And to be able just to do it, not only for the news publicity, but also for the students, how much, it's all all about the student athletes. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And it's been amazing to watch. I would say 10 kids a year minimum have talked about how it just has totally changed their perspective of the kids that they've competed against their whole high school careers, right? They've always played against each other. Maybe they play together on a travel team or whatnot, but a lot of them, this is the first time where, maybe the shortstop and the second baseman are not enemies. They're on the same team. They realize that, to a large extent, all the student athletes in North Dakota are very, very similar. And even for some of our board members, and for me, specifically, a girl like Madison Sweep, who graduated a few years ago from Central Cass. I coached against her a lot, but now have a relationship outside of softball, and we talk to each other, and actually hope to have her back involved in some all-star stuff in the future. I think Erica Hermanson.
She's a Minot State Beaver, by the way.
Exactly. Yep. And you've got another name that comes to mind is Brooklyn Benno. I mean, these are kids that you follow, and if you like sports in North Dakota, and especially the Class B in that regard, you pay attention to them, a lot about them, but getting a chance to meet them, see their character, follow their careers a little more closely than maybe you would otherwise. Erica, as you just mentioned, playing in college. That's been a really unique experience for, I think, student athletes, and then, probably parents, coaches, administrators, that maybe we didn't even expect when we got into all this 6 years ago.
Have you seen or heard of any cases? How many coaches have had to advocate for this, before this event started? And you bring up another good point also, having any former softball athletes, have they had interest in coaching? Are there any that you know of coaching anywhere that would like this opportunity? Just touch on some of this.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, at the beginning, and I think this is common for a lot of people and groups that go on any sort of uncharted adventure, I mean, we heard a lot of no's. Most of the all-star events are sponsored by the high school Coaches Association. We have a ton of respect for that organization, but they didn't have any interest at all in a softball type event. Then you start reaching out about, once we did decide to go forward, where are these games going to be played? What kids are going to be nominated, or more importantly, what kind of information can coaches provide for the seniors? So they can, so we have a pool of athletes to select from. And that was really difficult, especially the first year or two. And I won't name the name of a coach, but to give you an example, the first year there was a coach that I know, and and she did not want her kids involved. She didn't
Wow.
believe in what we were doing. A few years later, that individual was involved with our event and literally came up to me and said, I was completely wrong. And
Oh my.
I tell that story just to paint the picture of maybe how far the sport of softball has come and how great of an opportunity a lot of student athletes and coaches have now. And yes, we do see there's more kids going to play college softball for one than ever in North Dakota, and that
Oh
number
yeah.
grows every year. I believe out of last year's senior class, there's over 30 who plan to go play college softball somewhere, which is incredible. But yeah, I mentioned the name Madison Sweep earlier. She's an assistant coach at Kindred Richland now. And I know just from having conversations, there are kids with aspirations of, maybe coaching high school after college. There's a ton of kids that have played in these all-star events that coach at the youth level. And I think their interest in sort of like, for lack of a better phrase, how can I give back? How can I be involved in the all-star thing going forward? It's definitely there. And it's kind of got us thinking as a board too, like what's the best way to incorporate these kids back into softball in North Dakota, and really, how do we let them sort of be the voice for this sport and these events, and how I don't want to say life-changing because I feel like that's overstating it, but sort of what kind of once in a lifetime experience this can be at the end of somebody's high school softball career.
The idea you bring up of former softball athletes going back to their original schools to be on the coaching staff. I've seen what you've seen before when Sal Rodriguez, Minot State baseball legend, became the head coach at Bishop Bryan.
Yep.
Grace Candrian, I believe, was a former student athlete at Bishop Bryan and also played softball, if I'm not mistaken, as well. She's on that coaching
Yep.
staff, and
Yep.
so that's just goes to show you the growth that this sport is having here in North Dakota. And really, you mentioned it. It was it that low of a point where people just did not want this to happen? It was that low of a point. Just kind of describe that more.
Yeah, no, great question. It's hard if you would have been able to forecast out 5 years ago what things would look like today in terms of high school fast pitch in North Dakota. People might tell you they could see this coming, but I would tell you they were lying to you. The number of teams growth we've had, I mean, shoot, I bet, and don't quote me, I'm guessing a little bit here,
All
but
right.
in the last 5 or 6 years, I bet we have 20-ish new high school softball teams. And not only that, but the level of competition, the depth of quality pitching. When I first started coaching at Northern Cass, in 2014, 15, whatever that was, if you had a good pitcher at any team in the state, you had a chance to win, right? And play for a state championship, maybe.
I totally believe that. Yeah.
And today, you better have one really excellent pitcher, another one who pushes that one, and probably a third one that can help you win games during the season. And a lot of teams have that. I just think 5 years ago, the concern, if you will, was, do we have enough good players? Are we really going to showcase what this game is? Or are we just going to get some kids together on a field and it sort of is what it is? And if that's the case, is it worth the time? I'd like to think that anybody who, felt that way or had those concerns 5-6 years ago has probably come around and seen, just how much this sport has evolved. And I'd like to think that what we're doing has at least, a small percent impact on that across the state.
Before ND Softball All Stars was formed, how would you say, how big were the tournaments? Was it as simple as going to just a regular game or even a tournament, whatever it was? that you guys wanted to do this? When did the idea click? Did it come after like a game or a tournament?
Yeah, great question. So, Pat Johnson, legendary coach at West Fargo and a program that's won seemingly 1,000 state championships in softball. I'm sure that number's a bit high, but it's not too high. He would host sort of like a jamboree type thing. I mean, there were probably, if I remember right, maybe 16 to 20 teams, which was really good. And that sort of went away. I'm not sure the reasons for it, but I do know putting together a tournament takes a lot of effort and a lot of manpower. But I think really maybe the aha moment was just being involved more in summer and travel softball and seeing more travel and competitive summer softball teams throughout the state. That's what summer softball is. I mean, I was a baseball guy growing up, and when I think baseball, I think of those weekend tournaments. And I'm northern Minnesota, so I think of when we'd travel an hour and a half to Duluth for a weekend tournament, or 3 hours to the Minneapolis St. Paul area. Those are some of my best memories. So it kind of felt like the kids not having an opportunity to do that, for one, was probably a miss. But then second, you'd get to, not that many years ago, you'd get to a state tournament and you'd have 4 teams from the East and 4 teams from the West. And like maybe they've played one game combined against each other. And that seemed crazy to us. Like, let's play, from a Class B perspective. I want to see Central Cass and Kindred and teams like that playing Des Lacs, Burlington, Lewis and Clark, Bishop, Ryan, Heart River, whoever the kind of top teams are for that year. And the same in Class A, like Dickinson and Minot and the Bismarck schools. They should be playing the Fargo schools in Valley City and Devil's Lake. They can't all play each other every year, but that should be more normal. And I think it is. I think it's been more normal as the sport has grown. But a tournament where you can have, we could have unlimited teams, but maybe we'll get to 24 or 28 teams for 2022. I mean, that's incredible. And you can put together those matchups that, that activities directors can't just throw together on a Tuesday night because of distance, and can't go across the state for a Saturday to just play 2 games. Maybe they need to make it 4 in a weekend or what have you. And if last year is any indication, I would think our event is here to stay. Just the quality games that came of it and the good experiences for the schools, I think, was pretty successful.
Absolutely. And I remember once upon a time back in 2018, Minot High took one of those state titles. I believe it was against West Fargo, I'm pretty sure. So, but like you said, West Fargo having all those titles, it's crazy number. But when you find some ways that you guys want to promote these athletes in the state, are there some creative ways in there? What are some things that you guys can do to reach out and just give these student athletes all the love and support they can?
Yeah, wow, great question. So I'm kind of a marketing guy by trade, so that's right up my alley. What we do, or sort of what our philosophy is that if you are telling a story and it's a relevant one, people will listen. And as soon as we started, highlighting players, highlighting teams, sort of just doing the old fashioned, like we sent out press releases and reaching out through text, email, phone call, just to, going back a few years, right? Just to let people know, how many great softball players and student athletes we have playing at, Mickelson Park in Fargo this date and this time. Come on out. There's a story here if you want it. For the tournament, it seems silly, but if the Fargo Forum, and I'm not picking on them, I'm just going local to where the tournament was. If they're not gonna come out and cover, 30 games or whatever we had because there's several other things going on in the area. Well, then we're going to do it. So we posted, looking at our tournament, we posted every score from every game. The ones where we had enough information, we provided, short write-ups or game summaries or highlights. And same with, when you get to the All-Star game, publish that stuff, send it out, put it in front of people. I think when you're a coach, let's say, your responsibility to your kids and your program is a lot different than, I guess, PR efforts for the sport of softball. So when there's a good story there, we try to make something of it, whether it's, letting the local media know that story exists or, sort of taking it on ourselves. And that's something we did last year too, with, a lot of stuff being shut down for COVID. I mean, the 2020 All-Star group, with no disrespect to any of the others, that might have been the most talented group of kids we ever would have put on a field. So not, tweeting and Facebooking and putting together stories on our website, like, we just feel like that would have been a disservice to the kids. The Erica Hermansons, Abby Kessels, I probably shouldn't have started naming names because I'm never going to get through them all, but just all the pitchers and all the great players and a lot of kids who played since 7th or 8th grade on their varsity teams. Like, those are the stories you'd see on the news for, maybe a great basketball player or a volleyball player committed to Concordia College or Minot State or, even Lake Region or something like that. Our philosophy has just been, tell people about these kids, tell people about these teams, tell people about this sport.
And their recruitments as well to college.
Well, and that to me is the biggest thing. Like, success for us as an organization is to see the sport of softball grow. And when I look and see 30 plus names from a group of kids that didn't get a junior high school softball season because it was wiped out from COVID, they're going to go play softball in college at that number. I mean, that's incredible. And I think people should know that.
Absolutely. And, you bring up, how much this sport has grown. I've seen, I think I've brought this up already, all the huge tournaments that go on at the South Hill Softball Complex. But not only that, but also the summer travel, with all these teams, playing with, especially I've seen the Minot Storm, the 18U, 16U, 14U, all that stuff. You will see once in a while that one kid that's still probably in middle school, but that's really talented at softball. That's, really huge. That's a great point you bring up as well. Just any way you can get, is there like, I don't want to say specifically special treatment, but is there like ways that you guys do to promote, like, hey, there's a new young buck coming from here, or what have you? What's some insight on that?
Yeah, we do. And it, you think about, let's go hockey, because I played hockey growing up. Those kids start at 5, 6, 7 years old. And, the mystique of a really great player starts to grow when they're in peewees and bantams, and people start following and hopefully follow their career through high school. And right. Well, I think it's the same about softball. These kids are starting younger, which is really good, gives them more time to develop. And, Beulah had a kid on their team this year, middle schooler. She's probably their number 2 pitcher. I mean, just an excellent kid and an excellent student athlete. And you start to, share a story about that kid, share a stat about that kid, as well as many others. But then you start hearing coaches talk about that kid, and it's coaches from the West, and then it's, coaches from the East who haven't played Beulah, and now Beulah's in the state tournament, and it's the coach who is going to coach against Beulah that goes, hey, they got a kid here, a young one worth watching. And that's like word of mouth once you get it in the softball community. think you kind of just alluded to it. The community is growing so much, and a lot of it in the summer softball sphere. Like, I think that's just so healthy for the game, and that there's these young kids at Logan Gronberg at Bismarck. I mean, she was, noted as one of the top players in the state back in 8th grade, and then, Gatorade Player of the Year in maybe both 9th and 10th grade. And that's just so good for the game that you can look at the future and talk about the future. And then, over time, the future is here. And now you've watched a kid or a team or several kids like grow up through high school softball. I just think that's really neat.
It's amazing how some of these kids hone their talent and skills and turn it into some great achievements and accomplishments. And, taking that into the All-Star Series, you guys just held the 2021 games between the East and West All-Stars. I'll say this now, that I'm going to be an advocate for the West because some of Minot's finest were part of that team, and also some other pretty good local Class B kids, especially with Sylvie and Nora Kramer from Bishop Ryan. I forgot some of the scores, but I did manage to catch some of it. I believe it was on Magnitude Sports. You guys had it on there?
Yep.
And shout out to them for a great production they put on a day-by-day routine. But first off, how did this event get started? What was the first year and the first host city to have this?
Yeah, it's been fun to watch it grow up. So this was, we count the COVID year because we did select all-stars and we honored them in a different way, even though we didn't have the opportunity to play a game. So this most recent year was year 5. When we started, like I kind of said before, we were maybe scratching this together against odds a little bit. And we played the first ever game on a very hot day in Mandan.
Oh, nice.
5 years ago, the Monday after that state tournament, we got everybody together in Mandan. It ended up being a perfect day, great game, and a nice field. And it was about perfect for the event, especially not knowing what to expect. Then we played the next night at Mickelson Park in Fargo, where, if really anybody who's played any kind of softball in the Fargo area has played there, kind of a historic field. State tournament's been there a number of times. It's just a really good fit. And, since then we've played in a couple different places. We moved from Mandan to Bismarck on the west side of the state and played at their newer turf field, which has been really great. This past year was the first time we took the East game away from Mickelson, and we played at Cost Field in Castleton at Central Cass High School. Really an incredible complex, just an amazing Class B sports complex. And now we're to the point where I get, text, emails, phone calls from different coaches and even some administrators saying, how do we play here? And not to pick on any of the schools or anything like that, but it's been maybe unique going from having a little bit of a hard time finding somebody who would want to host us to, kind of having not our pick of every field, but just some interested parties and people that do want to, help out and volunteer to host our games.
Not to be that guy, but any sort of indications for Minot? I'm kidding, but is there, but I guess, it's still kind of fair to ask, is there any other locations you guys are thinking about if Minot is on that list? And if not, any other locations you guys are sort of thinking about?
No, that's a great question. And you've mentioned South Hill a number of times. I've had a chance to coach out there, both some regular season stuff and some state tournament stuff. The facility is great. And, we've talked a lot about the growth of softball. The growth of facilities is really impressive. I could talk about that all night, so we'll let that be a different podcast for a different day.
Oh, yeah.
But the one space we're challenged is we really feel like we have to do things in a pretty tight time frame. So what happens for a lot of these kids, if their team has the opportunity to play in a state tournament, they're probably leaving on a Wednesday. They're playing Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in a state tournament. A lot of these kids will either go graduate on Sunday or have a grad party on Sunday. and then they're back with us Monday and Tuesday. And everybody asks, so I might as well just address it. It's really like and that was one of the big challenges up front. If we're going to do it, it has to be the weekend after state, because if you wait a little bit, you get into the basketball and volleyball all-star dates. And also, if these kids are not going to play beyond high school, I think it's important for them to be in playing shape, especially if they pitch. We're trying to do everything we can to not have kids hurt. So that's the dynamic, and trying to work the infrastructure and travel and everything around that. You mentioned Minot, but Jamestown, they've got the college field. That's a location we've been interested in, which is technically west, but relatively east. If you look at a map, there's a couple different places in Fargo that West Fargo, Cheyenne, for example. I know they'd love to have us, and they have a nice facility. And at some point here, really the goal, and saying this out loud means I'll have to get it done one of these years, we'd really love to play one of the days at Theraldson Park on the campus at NDSU. That multi-million-dollar upgrades they've made there, and kind of, no disrespect to UND, but NDSU, kind of long-standing, really successful Division I program. I mean, it would just be a great reward for those kids to be able to, play a game or two on that field to round out their career. So we don't quite have things finalized for 2022, but I'm excited about the options and the conversations that we've had. And I think that, our goal has sort of changed, and like, how can we get some of these different facilities of different size and location involved, especially after we played in Castleton. The crowd at that Class B, and a diehard Class B sports school, but the crowd there was phenomenal, and kind of just opened our eyes to the thought of, finding more venues and schools that are willing to host us, or, in the case of NDSU, just would be an amazing experience for the kids.
It'll also be a great opportunity for the NDSU coaching staff to get a look at these kids close by, and it'll also be, a great thing maybe also for the students to get maybe a campus tour or anything like that. So a lot of things, that go into consideration for these types of things. But, for continuing with All-Stars, what do you guys look for in these softball athletes when you make the calls to let them know that they've been named to the All-Star teams? And a follow-up, is it an only senior thing, or have there been any sophomores or juniors or even freshmen involved?
Yep. So that's a great question. Honestly, probably the question I get most. And it's funny, I get it a lot from the parents of the kids who get picked. I kind of say like, hey, we're super excited, but how did we end up here? So I'd be happy to tell you a little bit about the process. And it is a senior only thing, which in my opinion is both awesome and a little bit limiting, because you're limited by the size of the senior class, really. That is instituted by the state of North Dakota, or the NDHSAA, and some of their eligibility rules. So seniors only. And essentially we have like an all-star voting process, and really at the beginning of the whole thing, every senior in the state is an option to be an all-star. So really that's requirement number one. Requirement number two is that they're in, complete good standing. So the grades are acceptable. They haven't had any academic or otherwise infractions that have caused them to miss time. Nothing violating anything in the state handbook policy, the school handbook policy. We want to make sure these are kids who are not in any sort of doghouse with their coaches, right? They're good quality members of their team and their school and their society. So unfortunately, sometimes that does, start to reduce the pool, and then coaches get involved at that point and can identify like, this kid is a senior, but they just came out for softball last year, and we kind of work through all that. So ultimately, the coaches help us form the pool of their kids that are eligible. They'll provide, often a short write-up why they believe this kid should be an all-star, or a set of stats or whatever they might wish to provide. At that time, all the names go basically into buckets by region. So we just do it by the 4: A East, B East, A West, B West. And then the coaches within those regions get the opportunity to vote. And so really you're to simplify it, you're nominated by your coach essentially, and then the student athletes are voted on by the coaches that coach against them. You're allowed to vote for your own players too, I guess. Then essentially what my group is doing at All Stars is now we just put the pieces of the puzzle together. So some years it's really simple, and you do the math and you take the top kids and you look at it all, and you've got pitchers and catchers and infielders and outfielders, and everything works fantastic. Some years then, our baseline of kids is usually 12 or 13. And then some years we have to, or get to, I don't know, it's exciting for me, get to start adding on kids because, okay, we've only got one catcher, so we're going to add a catcher in the West, and that allows us to put in the next player in the East. So now we're at, say, 13 kids. Okay, and now the East only has 2 kids who pitch a lot for their teams. We need to add a third. We figure out who that one would be. And then, okay, now we're going to add the next player in the West. So kind of we just worry about roster composition when it gets to us and make sure all the positions are taken care of. But otherwise, I mean, they're really selected through a process of their coaches and the coaches that coach against them, which is, really makes it like a grassroots all-star selection process, which I think is pretty cool.
Preaching the topic of coaches identifying not only good players, but good kids as well. In professional sports, sometimes, on a regular broadcast from the people calling the game, sometimes we'll hear about scouts going to watch different teams. Well, I don't know if they actually mention that, but sometimes we'll hear about scouts going to watch different teams play at several remote locations to kind of get an insight on players that they may try to acquire via trade or sign in free agency. That necessarily doesn't work here, but do you guys do something similar? Like, do you guys look for, certain softball athletes that maybe their names did not get brought up, that they might be bringing some attention to some of you guys? Do you guys do some scouting of your own? And also, how many softball games do you guys try to attend for the idea of trying to look at these players, not just trying to name all-stars this upcoming year, but also looking at maybe some potential future all-stars?
Absolutely, we do. And our organization is comprised of currently an 8-person board of directors that sort of manages everything day to day. And both me and my wife are on that board, and we both have experience coaching high school softball, and we try to watch as much as we can. The maybe one of the benefits that have come out of COVID times is it's a lot easier to sit on my couch and watch a game now, which is really nice. And one I remember, for example, was early this spring, sat on my couch and watched a feed of Dickinson playing Bismarck. And that's, I live in West Fargo, North Dakota personally, so that's a game I'm never going to probably get to on a Tuesday afternoon, but being able to watch it from home was really cool. Then we've got, not to go through everybody, but we've got Mike Scogan is on our board, and he is the owner of the FM Ball Yard. So he sees a lot of these kids, whether it's in his facility or through coaching in travel ball or the kids playing on his travel ball team. Mike Elke is on our board. He's the head softball coach at North Dakota State College of Science. So I don't know if I could put a number on how many games or how many kids we've identified, but we definitely are watching games and having lots of conversations. I should mention Corey Erickson is on our board. He's the head softball coach for Hillsborough Central Valley. So certainly he's probably seeing these players more regularly and up close than we are. But we do like to, for lack of a better term, sort of forecast out, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, because it gives us an idea, of numbers, like next year's graduating class for softball players just across the state of North Dakota is a much smaller number than it was this last year, or 3 years ago now was a gigantic graduating class. So we're paying attention to class size, and then I think just by default you end up identifying kids. And there was one instance this year where when we were getting everything ready for the coaches to vote, there was a name that we noticed that we didn't have, and I reached out to that coach and we had a conversation. And that coach had kind of thought, well, I've got this one kid that I really think has a good shot at making the team. What do you think? Like, are they going to vote against one of my kids because they're only going to pick one? And we kind of got into like deep voting theory. But at the end of the day, just encouraged him to, hey, make sure you get information in about your kid, and let's make sure she has an opportunity to get picked. Lo and behold, she was selected for the games. So I think we almost end up in like a consultant role to some degree, which I think is really healthy, because when you're coaching and you're busy with your kids and you're getting into the stretch run of the season, sometimes just another voice or another idea is helpful.
Yep. So it has happened before, and if you're not on the original list, just keep focused, don't give up, and you might find yourself on there pretty much. Correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
And so you guys, there's another promotional tool that you guys have in your back pocket, the Midseason Madness. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the event where you take a bunch of teams around the state and pull them all into one softball complex for just a regular tournament. It's not postseason. But we got word here in Minot that the Majets will be going next spring. How much do you think does a function like this help a team be better prepped for high-octane softball or action before or after the event?
Quite honestly, I think Central Cass and Dickinson won their collective state championships in large part to seeing each other in our tournament. It's just a unique opportunity. So there's a few of us on the board that spent a lot of time for 2021. We'll do it again for 2022, trying to build compelling matchups against relatively evenly matched teams that don't see each other very often. And of course, to some degree, we were super successful. And, unfortunately, like it's going to be, there were still some quite lopsided scores, which we try to avoid. But, Central Cass in a B school played Dickinson in an A school, for example. And I actually caught a Dickinson parent almost whining about, we're coming all the way here and we have to play a B school. And well, then Central Cass beat them 3-1. And I know Amanda, the head coach over at Dickinson, and she said after the game, she said, Tim, that's the best pitching we've seen in weeks. Wow. And then you start to go down the line. Delax, Burlington, Lewis, and Clark played Kindred, Thompson, and Central Cass. I mean, those are three of, perennially the top 5, 6, 7 teams in the state. And they got to see where they were at. And there's no doubt if you'd ask Peggy, she'd tell you it was good for her team to go through that and to play those teams. And there was a lot of that. And I think teams who didn't go saw the value in it, even though they weren't there. Minot, for example, they're going to come down this next year, and we're going to give them 3 good opponents. I don't know who that's going to be next, or who that's going to be yet, but, they might have an opportunity to play, Fargo North, a Grand Forks team. Maybe they'll play Central Cass, like just a good, challenging game that doesn't count in your region standings. I think that's an opportunity to make every team better. And when we did get some of those lopsided games, maybe a 14-2 or something like that, I had conversations with those coaches too, and they said, hey, this was a chance to get my 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th kid on the roster on the field. That's hard to do in my conference games, but I got a chance to do it here. So I think there's really good opportunity for everybody who comes out, and like a Minot, they're going to be on the bus for a while. They're probably going to be at a hotel. They're probably going to eat some meals together. So I think that's probably great for team chemistry too, and some opportunities to bond with each other.
Yeah, it'll be a good challenge too to, see what you got and what you can game plan for certain situations. And so I think that's going to be a great opportunity for them. Well, I think we touched on this a little bit, I believe, with the All-Star Series, but kind of putting it all together. So you guys wanted to make sure to confirm some dates on the show here. What are some potential locations you guys want to have for both All-Star Series and Midseason Madness tournaments, and also just confirm some dates as well?
Yep, let's start with the tournament. So we're set for that first Friday and Saturday of May. And we're going to try to stick with that, but depending on how early or late in the month there are some conflicts, or how early or late in the week, there are some conflicts that we try to avoid, but we'll be the same. So I think it's the 6th and 7th off the top of my head, but it's the first Friday and Saturday in May. We'll be back at the North Softball Complex just north of Fargo here for this year, or for 2022. We have talked about all sorts of different things for 2023 potentially, but we'll plan at least for sure to continue that. And then we'll do the same with the All-Star Series. So the 6th annual Shield Softball All-Star Series will be the Monday and Tuesday after the state tournament. And as long as we keep these themes, it'll be the same. So it'll be like May 6th and 7th for the tournament, June 6th and 7th for the All-Star games. And I don't want to, overpromise here, but I think you'll see a commitment to some field locations for 2022 All-Star Series pretty soon. We're still ironing out some details and working through some of that stuff, but the dates are set. I checked this morning. We have 18 teams committed to the tournament for next year. We'd really love to see 24 or 30. That's a lot, but we're headed in the right direction for that.
Absolutely, and a lot of good stuff here, Minot sports fans. If you're interested in any sort of some great softball action, whether it's All-Star or Midseason Madness, you're never gonna find a bad game there. And just kind of tell us, what are maybe some other future events that are in consideration? What do you guys want to show off the sport on repeat here in the Peace Garden State? What does the future of Endless Possibilities look like for ND Softball All-Stars?
Yeah, what a great question. Something we talk about and think about a lot. Right now, primary focus, I think, is just to continue to make our All-Star event bigger and better every year. I feel like we've been successful in that, but every time you raise the bar, then you got a bigger challenge next year. But we do have, a few ideas that surround getting some of our alumni, if that's a fair term, back to the event for 2022 and beyond. I think we got some fun stuff there, and really we just need to duplicate what happened for that tournament. We had so many, really good things that we heard and really good stuff on the field. And really probably our next steps are more, behind the scenes. We've talked about, are there programs and ways we can help some of these new programs financially through grants or something of the sort for, across the whole state, for sort of new to softball people? Is there a way that we can set aside some funds to help with, there's not a lot of equipment, but, gloves, cleats? Is there a way we can help in that regard? And we've also talked a little bit about, can we put together a scholarship program that, might be for someone who was not selected as an all-star, but is a top-notch student athlete nonetheless. Can we put something together where maybe they could be getting $1,000 or $2,500 towards their college education? So a lot of that stuff, we're kind of talking about and sort of excited to re-explore some of this stuff as we can hopefully, work our way more and more out of this pandemic here over time.
Whether that happens or not, well, we'll at least hope to see that hopefully some of those things get put into place. And, if it doesn't work out, there's still lots of, ideas out there to, get even more out of the student athletes. So a lot of good things there, Mr. Howe. But we're almost out of time here. Just kind of last few bits here. Did you catch any of the College World Series in softball, or maybe even some softball in the Olympics? What were some things that stood out to you if you saw any?
Absolutely, yeah. Usually the College World Series championship series is the same nights as the All-Star games, but they ran into some weather, which was really nice for my viewing habits because they ended up playing those on Wednesday and Thursday, so got to watch there. And my takeaway from the College World Series, for starters, was, to me, the story was James Madison. And, we're familiar with that school in our neck of the woods if you follow NDSU football at all.
Oh, yeah.
But really, until last year, they were an unknown in college softball. And not only did they make it to the College World Series, but they were a force. Their pitcher became the most popular softball player on the planet there for a week. Just super cool to sort of see that underdog story. But to me, it just spoke to how much the game of softball has grown and how much tighter the competition has gotten. And then, the College World, or the Olympics, was really interesting to me because my takeaway there, which I tried to watch every game, but the times they were on made it a little bit challenging, was just that at the end of the day, this sport is still based on pitching and defense. And for the most part, the USA, gave up like one run through the qualifying rounds or something like that. And then if you watched that gold medal game, outstanding pitching on both sides, one or two timely hits was the difference. Otherwise, it was pitching and great defense. So I kind of think that old adage of, defense wins championships, so to speak, that's still there in this sport, which is that's what I prefer. I know everybody's different, but I'll take a 2-1 or 1-0 game over a 15-11 every day of the week.
Oh, yeah, those games will go quick, but they're also super entertaining. And props to the College Softball World Series as well, getting, I believe it was more viewership than the Baseball World Series, if I'm not mistaken there. Have you seen anything like that? Did they get more viewers?
Yep, that's exactly right. They smashed all their own records, and I think, on almost every level, they outdid the Baseball College World Series. And that's impressive because what happens in Omaha every June, that's a huge deal in college sports. So it really tells you, how big of a scene softball is. And, we've got a kid on this side of the state. She hasn't played high school softball, but from Kindred Richland, who she does play high school basketball and other things. She's committed to play softball at Alabama, and Alabama played in that College World Series. And
that's insane.
To think somebody in our own backyard might be on that stage in a year or two is just, it's kind of surreal to think about.
Oh, yeah, always for sure. Fantastic thing to watch. And, hopefully all the success and best of luck to them too. And just kind of, some famous, athletes in the softball world. Do you guys, pay much attention, or do you guys watch a lot of, people like Haley Cruz or, any other advocates for the game of softball? Do you pay attention to any of those guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel maybe that I'm going to paint myself into the older category when I give some names, but not too far removed. For starters, there's a girl from Fort Wayne, Indiana named Ashley Burkhart. She played at Purdue. She has played on some of the U.S. teams. She hasn't been an Olympian, but when we couldn't play our all-star games last year, she actually, because we have a good relationship with her, she spoke to all of our all-stars on a Zoom call, did Q&A. It was pretty incredible. Kind of some of the people that we connect with in the softball world would be Amanda Scarborough, who is an outstanding pitcher at Texas A&M. Drawing a blank a little bit. I think Texas A&M, and she has worked on some of the ESPN broadcasts. Jen Schroeder from UCLA. She has a pretty big following in the catcher world. Have some connections to Delaney Spalding, who is a starting shortstop on the Olympic team. So I think we've kind of used that as an avenue too to try to show that the sport of softball isn't just a down south thing or something like that. There's really good softball up here, and that kind of connection to some of those, higher end or higher notoriety college athletes, I think has been super good.
Absolutely. And yeah, anytime you can get, someone like that from Purdue or any big name university, even just for like a Zoom session, because of course the games couldn't happen last year, but just a Zoom session like that, that's still got to keep the kids excited, even if they can't see them in person. That's props and great work for you guys. And last question here before we get off, what is a long-lasting impression you guys want to leave these athletes when they leave for college or any other future endeavors, whether it's softball or not?
Well, I think it's just that they made a difference, and they're going to continue to make a difference. It's hard to measure, who and how much, but I've always kind of gone by the philosophy, and probably because of how I grew up too. But whoever you are, somebody is watching you, and there's probably some 8-year-old from Minot that was a huge Landry Maragos fan before she ever made one of the greatest catches in North Dakota high school softball history. My kid, because of coaching, I mean, he's a boy, but he's learned from some of the kids that I've coached, and they have those conversations. But that's happening everywhere. There's always somebody watching, and there's somebody that they don't even know out there that when they get named an all-star, or they see their name in the paper, or their highlight is on TV, that is super excited about that. Maybe the kid's 8, maybe the kid is on the JV team. And I think that kind of just that mindset and understanding that there's people out there that are proud of you. You've done a great job. You have probably made a ton of sacrifices to get where you are, and you've put yourself in a really great position for life, which ends up at the end of the day being so much more important than, youth and high school softball. But just feel like the kids should know that, and the kids should understand that. And that's something we try to talk about with the kids, or, Zoom, I guess the 1 year with the kids, is just making sure that they understand that. And hopefully they think about that and remember that as they go forward, and maybe click in their mind that, yeah, when they were the backup third baseman on varsity, their eyes were always on that shortstop, because that's what they wanted to be, as they got to 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. And, that's out there for literally every kid that is playing high school sports. You're mentoring somebody, whether you know it or not.
Absolutely. And another thing here, any advice for me on how I can get started in rec league softball? I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I'm
just
way
find
too
somebody who plays.
I'm way too unathletic for that. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tim Howe. He is the president of North Dakota Softball All-Stars. Mr. Howe, is there anything else you'd like to mention? Would you like to tell people about the Softball All-Stars social media, especially the Twitter page, and anything else?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you both for this, hour-long conversation about softball, which is incredible. Couldn't even have imagined this 6 years ago. The coverage you do and posting scores out in the west side of the state, that's super helpful for us too. Our Twitter feed gets pretty crazy on like a Tuesday and Thursday during the spring. It's really nice to see that.
I see where you're getting at there.
But yeah, go follow us on the socials. I mean, we're a little bit quiet this time of year, but on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, you can just search NDSB as in North Dakota Softball. So NDSB All-Stars, and that's our website too, ndsballstars.com. And like I say, we're maybe relaxing a little bit right now, but as we trend through the winter and back into the spring, we'll be busy as ever on there. So certainly give us a follow, and feel free to interact and send us any stories, tidbits, news clips, pictures, videos. We love all that stuff, and we love resharing it to everybody else.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Howe, thank you for being on the podcast today, and definitely best of luck to you and all your group in the promotion of the sport of softball here in the great state of North Dakota. So thank you for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a blast.
Absolutely. Minot sports fans, you just heard the president of North Dakota Softball All-Stars. That is Tim Howe. We thank him for being on, and we will be right back after this quick break.
Welcome to KMSU TV and radio. You might be asking, what is KMSU? It is the brand name for the MSU Broadcasting Department, home to the many young and aspiring communication majors here at Minot State University. When joining KMSU, there will be many different opportunities to get involved. Students will get a hands-on learning experience in lots of future career fields, like the production of content, being a leader in public relations, operating social media, or even writing and journalism. KMSU is also home to the local public access channel, where students can produce the weekly campus TV show and talk on live radio. From us here at KMSU, we hope to see you along the way.
Alrighty, Minot sports fans, we just got done talking to the president of the North Dakota Softball All-Stars, Tim Howe. Great chat with him, not only about the current state of the game here in North Dakota, but also getting to know a lot of the athletes that have been successfully chosen to represent not only their schools, but also be good ambassadors for the game of softball. Not only that, but also looking forward to witnessing all that will be growing this game in the near future. And not only that, we also hope for the success of our local softball teams here in town with Minot High and Bishop Bryan, along with the Minot Storm as well. Didn't really talk much about the summer travel teams, but that's still, that's still a key point to factor in there, that maybe there is some congregation or partnership with the Softball All-Stars. But with all that said, Minot sports fans, that is the conclusion of Episode 5 in the 2021 Summer Series production of the Minot Sports Podcast. Thank you guys for listening in each and every day. As always, we are brought to you by KMSU TV and radio. We thank them for lending us their studios to record each episode. And thanks goes to Joshua Strong and Peyton Bartsch Photography for their help and contributions to the podcast as well. We're just winding down on summer, folks, and pretty soon here we're going to be hitting up Herb Parker, Dwayne Carlson, the gyms, the MSU Dome even, for the start or the opener of the fall sports season. So stay connected on here, Minot sports fans, also on social media. Go check out the podcast on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Be sure to follow our sponsors as well on those same platforms, KMSU, Joshua Strong, and Peyton Bartsch Photography. Of course, we thank them once again. That is going to do it, Minot sports fans. Hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe and healthy out there, and take care as always. Peace out.